Hey everyone, my name is Abby and we're so excited that you're joining us today. Today we're talking about the story of the bronze serpent. The Israelites had grown discontent with the food that God had miraculously provided for them. After a bit of complaining, they turned on Moses and spoke against God. They turned on God because they didn't trust that God had what was best for them in mind. We all grow discontent from time to time, and when we do, it's important to remember this. Every day, I can trust Jesus. We're going to start things off by singing a song together, so go ahead and stand up and sing this out with us as loud as you can.
This life is a journey, a path made for me. With every step I take, as I run this race, I'm becoming the person you call me to be. A child of God, a life redeemed. So I set my eyes on you, Jesus, I'm ready. This is the journey of a lifetime. The journey of a lifetime. God, you already know me. I wanna know you. Me grow stronger and discover the truth. I'm ready, let's go. Where you lead, I'll follow. Where you lead, I'll go. Not gonna wait for tomorrow. This is the journey of a lifetime. With every step I take, with every step I take, I'm becoming the person you call me to be. A child of God, a life redeemed. So I set my eyes on you, Jesus, I'm ready. I'm ready, let's go.
You guys sounded amazing. Thank you for singing along with us. Now we're gonna take some time to watch a Bible story together. Like I said earlier, today's story is about the bronze serpent, so let's check it out.
It's time for a Bible story. This story begins with a group of people called the Israelites.
I've heard of those guys before. They were the ones that were like slaves in Egypt, and then that one guy was like, let them go. And then the other guy was like, no way, bro. And then God was like, fine then, do the big splash wave, son. Judged and rescued.
Close enough. The Israelites were rescued by God from being slaves in Egypt. And after that, they started traveling across the desert to a place God promised them, called the Promised Land.
That's a good name. Sounds promising.
It was. Their future home was a paradise that God wanted them to live and thrive in, but first, they'd have to get there.
What are you talking about? It's like right next to where they came from. Look at that. What's the problem? I can make that trip in like, what, 45 minutes? No problem. Give me a helicopter, maybe a dune buggy, throw in a movie, get some big gulps, no prob.
Well, sure, but this was like thousands of years ago, remember?
Right, yes. I forget that a lot, huh?
Literally every time.
Shrug emoji. So what'd they do, like just hoof it across the desert?
Actually, yeah. They set out traveling toward the promised land, but traveling on foot like that across the desert was not easy.
Yeah, no kidding, man. I can barely make it across the driveway when I gotta take the trash out.
Well, imagine that, but like a million times farther and in the desert. And instead of just trash, it was like everything you own.
Yowza. Okay, so what happened next?
As they traveled across the desert, God totally took care of them. He provided water when they needed it, food when they were hungry, and protected them from enemies as they went along.
That is awesome. Okay, all right, so they made it across. Case closed. End of story. Roll credits.
Not so fast. The Israelites had one big problem: complaining.
Okay, hold on. Wait, what?
They got pretty ungrateful for everything they'd been given and had some pretty rotten attitudes toward God.
Hold the phone. Let me get this straight. Okay, so God rescued them from slavery.
Yes.
Gives them like food and water in the desert.
Yeah.
Protects them from bad guys.
Yep.
And they're a bunch of grumbly grumbles about it? What a bunch of lamos.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't great. They sinned against God and basically turned on him. And because of that, they weren't protected like they used to be. In fact, a bunch of snakes in the desert started biting them.
Whoa, yikes. Desert snakes? Oh man, those are like the second worst kind.
Wait, what's the first?
Space snakes.
Ah, of course. Tons of them were bitten by these snakes, and a bunch of them even died.
Oh man, that's rough. So like what happened?
Well, God told Moses, their leader, to make a bronze serpent on a staff and put it in the ground where everyone could see it.
Okay, like a snake scarecrow?
No, not like that. It was like a symbol. God instructed anyone that was bitten by a snake to look at the staff, and they would live.
Okay, cool, all right. And did it work?
Of course. God was reminding them to look to him whenever they got into trouble, instead of just complaining about it and hardening their hearts. And even though we're not in the same kind of situation today, that principle still applies. God has done so much for us when we didn't even deserve any of it. So all we can do is be grateful and continually say, thank you.
Ah, you're welcome, man.
Wait, no, I was saying, like, thank you to God.
Oh, right. My bad. Just a reflex. Hashtag manners.
No worries. So remember, God has done so much for us, and we always want to make sure that we stay grateful and thankful for how much he loves us.
And also, watch out for space snakes.
Yes, also that. The end.
The Israelites had turned on Moses. They'd become ungrateful for the things that God had done for them. So they began to speak against God and they sinned against him. Once that happened, out came poisonous snakes that started biting people. It was all hopeless until God had Moses make that bronze serpent. Then and only then was there a way for those who were bit to live. I would encourage you to pause the video here and take a couple of minutes to talk about the Bible story we just watched. Put yourself in the Israelites' shoes. How would you have felt if you were in the desert with the Israelites and snakes started jumping out at you? Then, once you're done talking about that, unpause the video and continue. Our friend Pastor Cameron is going to be talking to us a little bit more about our story right now. So let's take a look.
Have you ever received a gift, maybe on your birthday or on Christmas, that you had been waiting for so long? And once you finally got it, you were so excited and you loved it so much. Maybe it was a toy or a game that you played with all the time, and even when you weren't playing with it, you were thinking about it because it's such a great thing. But then a month or two went by and you kind of stopped thinking about it as much. Then a couple more weeks go by and you stopped using it as much as well. Then a few more weeks go by and you see someone who has a better game or a better toy or a better thing, whatever it may be. All of a sudden, you start complaining about that thing that you once loved so much. You wish it was better, like the newer thing that your friend has. For me, it's these things. When I got my first iPhone, I loved it so much for about a year. Then the newer model came out. Then I kind of hated my old phone. There was something newer and better, and I was discontent with what I had. You know, the Israelites felt the same way in our story today. Remember when we talked about the Israelites in the wilderness? When they were hungry, God miraculously provided bread and quail for them. Well, fast forward to our story today, and the Israelites are complaining about this, like I did with my iPhone. They said things like, "This food isn't good enough anymore." In one translation of the Bible, they call what God had been miraculously providing worthless food. Then they started complaining about even being rescued and delivered from Egypt, and they began to speak against God. And when that happened, out came the snakes. As a punishment, many were being bit by the snakes and even died because of the choices they made. A lot of us may think it's a bit silly that they would experience such amazing miracles and still be able to turn against God. But the truth is, this isn't a new thing. We saw this same thing happen in the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve. They were living the dream. They had everything they needed. The only catch was that they couldn't eat the fruit from one specific tree. In comes another snake. And after a short conversation with that snake, Adam and Eve sinned. They went their own way instead of God's way. Why? Why did they do this? They were discontent. Ultimately, they didn't trust that God knew what was best. They thought there was something better out there for them. Just like the Israelites with the miracle food, and just like me with my iPhone. When Adam and Eve sinned and ate the fruit, spiritually, they died. They were separated from God because of that sin. When the Israelites sinned, they were bit by the snakes, and they were dying. They begged Moses to ask God to save them, and once he did, God made a way for them to be saved. God told Moses to make a bronze serpent, kind of like this one, and set it on a pole. Anyone who looked to the bronze serpent would live and not die. So that's exactly what they did. The Israelites looked to the bronze serpent hanging up on that pole, and they were saved. This is actually a beautiful picture of Jesus. Just like that bronze serpent, Jesus was hung up on a cross. And like the Israelites, we were dying because of our sin. The only way for us to be saved is to look to the one hanging up on that cross. For the Israelites, it was the bronze serpent. But for us, it's Jesus. He said it himself in John 14:6. He said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." Looking to Jesus and choosing to follow him is the only way for us to be saved from our spiritual death. So, like the Israelites, we now have a way to be saved. But even though the Israelites were saved, the discontentment cycle continued. Many more times in the Bible, we see Israel turn from God in search of something better, because they forget where the only true satisfaction comes from. It's a relationship with God. The same is true for us. We may feel discontent at times, but remember, a relationship with Jesus is the only way to receive true, lasting satisfaction. And when we do struggle with thoughts of discontentment, because it will happen, we can trust that Jesus is there to bring us through it. It's like we always say, every day I can trust Jesus. Here's what I want you to see. The Israelites, Adam and Eve, and even us today are all looking for the same thing. We were all discontent. We were all looking for a satisfaction that can only come from one thing, and that is a real relationship with Jesus.
Pastor Cameron talked about how we're all looking for a lasting satisfaction. But like the Israelites, we constantly grow discontent with the things that we have. When we look for lasting satisfaction in anything other than a real relationship with Jesus, ultimately, we come up short. I would encourage you to take time right now to talk with your parents or your small group leaders about how and why you think we grow discontent. Once you're done talking about that, take a few minutes to pray and thank God for all that He's done for you. That's it for this week. Remember, every day we can trust Jesus. Thank you guys so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.